And we just want to thank you all for attending today's mini conference, Bridging the Digital Divide, Library Communities Respond. So just to review a few housekeeping matters before we get started, just please be sure to remain muted unless you're presenting. We'll be monitoring the chat, so you can enter your questions and comments there. And just be sure to use everyone if you're trying to send a chat to the group. And also just be aware that all of the chats will be part of the transcript, including those that are private chats. To indicate a response, you can click participants or reactions for your options there. And again, we are recording this conference, and we're going to have a link to the conference sent out early next week to everybody who registered to attend. Again, we've got the poll here if you want to take part in our poll. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to our keynote speaker, Rob Ross, Executive Director of NC Live.
All right. Well, thank you, Dawn, and thank you, everybody, for making time to be here today. I know it's a Friday, which can be hard, and also some of you may be hungover from the presidential debate last night. So I thank you for your attendance and attention. I'll try to keep it lively. So I'm just about to close this poll, but it is interesting to me how you guys answered. I wasn't exactly sure what to expect, but everyone, it looks like, said that they're either mostly or somewhat responsible for addressing the digital divide. So it kind of makes sense, I guess, that you're here. You would feel like you have a stake in that, but it's even higher than I thought. I was expecting a few people to say a little or it's not my problem, but this makes sense. So, all right, good. I'm glad you're all invested, so I will close that. All right, and the last bit of housekeeping for me, I just wanted to say that you'll notice in my presentation there are polls are popping up. Sorry, one second. You'll notice that in my presentation there are a lot of statistics and graphs and charts and things like that. So I know I'm presenting to librarians, so you guys are all going to want to like dig in and follow the link and look at the data. So I have put all the citations in the notes field rather than the slides because it was getting a little out of control. So you won't be able to dive in right now, but I'm happy to share this deck as soon as we're done. And if you want to like drill down into any one of these topics or just look at some data, just know that everything is cited. So I've been a good student, so you don't have to worry about where the data is coming from. All right, so I think that's it for me. So let me get going with the presentation. So I have 4 goals today, and I hope these sync up with your goals. The first one, and the one that I'll probably spend the most time on, is exploring the context in which the digital divide exists. I think based on the session descriptions for the rest of today, I think you're going to get a lot of really helpful, engaging, specific presentations about the digital divide and what folks are doing to try to close that or at least narrow that gap. So I thought, as the opener, I thought let's just figure out the context in which the digital divide exists. I think that it'll really inform whatever solutions we come up with. It'll be really helpful to know that this is a broader issue than just, usable devices or connectivity. So I'll spend quite a bit of time on that. Next up, I'll talk about how we can understand the extent of the digital divide. I think all of us have personal around this, people we know, patrons we serve, people in the community. So we'll have some statistics, but also some personal stories about, how much does this impact folks in the U.S. Then I'll ask a question and I'll give an answer. I'm not sure it's the right answer, but the question is, does it have to be this way? Like, do we have to live like this? And I don't know if it's a great metaphor or not, but we think of things like Wi-Fi access or usable devices. We think of those as commodities. You have to pay for them, and if you don't have the money, you may not be able to have those things. But there was, once upon a time, clean drinking water was a commodity that not everybody had. You had to like dig a well. Running water was not a thing. Indoor plumbing was not a thing. And nowadays, almost everybody has access to that. So it's interesting to think about this in a more historic context. Like, does it have to be this way? And what are some things, we could do as a society to make this more like water? We just take it for granted. It's always available. And then finally, I'll talk about some potential solutions. Spoiler alert, none of these are gonna like blow your mind. These are things that I'm sure a lot of you are doing already. And also I wanted to leave room for the other sessions today. So I think you'll be hearing a lot of potential solutions throughout the day. So that's it. That's kind of a quick summary of what I'll cover today. Okay, so I have a premise for this, and this is what got me started on this presentation. And my premise is that the digital divide is not an isolated issue. I think a lot of times it's presented that way, but it's actually just a symptom of widespread socioeconomic inequality, right? This is just one example of how there are haves and have-nots. So that's kind of my premise, and I hope that makes sense. So I'm going to start with inequality writ large, right? So this is just broadly thinking about inequality in the US. And so let's look at it from a few different angles. First, we'll look at inequality as a percentage of the whole. So I already mentioned the haves and have-nots. That's a phrase we throw around a lot. So we can kind of look at that and the numbers and how that's changed over time. Also, it's really interesting to compare the US to other countries, comparable countries, to figure out, how equal or unequal is it in the US or countries. Then we can look at inequality and then also over time to kind of figure out, is this getting better or is it getting worse or is it staying the same? So prepare yourself, there are charts coming. Here we go. All right, so the first chart really demonstrates a couple of things. It's really looking at 5 different groups. So everybody is broken up by earnings, right? So the highest earners all the way down to the lowest earners. And over the past 50 years, the highest earning 20% or the highest earning fifth of US households has steadily brought in a larger share of the country's total income. And just in case you're wondering, if you're in the top fifth in this chart, that means you have a household income of 130K or more. So that's what they're considered in the top fifth. So that particular tier brought in 52% of all income. And that's more than the lower 4/5 combined, right? So this graph, and this is where I'll try to tell some personal stories of times when a chart sort of resonates with me, or maybe it's me or someone I know. But I think about my own upbringing when I was growing up. We had a family of 6. My dad worked. My mom, raised us, so she didn't work outside the home. My dad was a school custodian. That was his job. No college education, and yet we had access to healthcare. We really didn't want for anything. And I think about this chart in particular, how that situation would be maybe not impossible, but very improbable today. If you think about how much a school custodian makes, and you factor in inflation over the last 50 years or so, and that's really an unlikely scenario. So that's my story. I'm sure you can think of other ways to interpret. But I guess the main point is you're seeing the top tier in terms of income getting bigger and really controlling more of the income in the U.S. All right, the next one I wanted to show you guys is comparing the U.S. to other countries. So it's kind of helpful to know where we stand. And this chart looks at the G7 countries. So these are generally, from a financial perspective, these are considered comparable to the U.S. So the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development uses this coefficient. Don't worry, you don't have to know any fancy statistics here. Basically, the closer you are to 0, the closer you are to total equality. Like the perfect equality would be a 0 score. So you actually want to be at the bottom of this chart if you're shooting for equality. And a 1, or the closer you get to the number 1, means you're completely unequal. So that's not where you want to be. So you can see where we score. It's last. So this is not the kind of chart you want to be first on. But it is interesting to look at that. And we kind of intuitively know, like we always sort of, I don't know if you guys do, but we always joke about the French and all their vacation time and how envious we are. That's just one example. But in terms of equality, it's interesting to see where we score. And it also tells us how far we have to go. So sometimes when we talk about things like the digital divide, it's helpful to know that, sure, it's a problem in other countries, but we are probably in a more difficult spot than most, and we have further to come. Okay, so I think it's also instructive to look at inequality by race. So you can see that income has gone up for everybody since 1970 when this chart starts, which is good. It's great when money goes up. But the gap between the relative income for whites and blacks has stayed the same. So this is maybe the most disheartening stat that I'll show you, because really in the last 50 years, the gap has not narrowed. You can see it almost mirrors, whatever's happening in the economy. It's not really closed at all. So later, when we talk more about the digital divide in particular, I think you'll see this gap sort of rear its head. You'll see how this is disproportionately affecting people of color. Okay, moving on. So another way to view inequality is by looking at the distribution of wealth over time. Let me break this chart down. It's a lot coming at you at once. So kind of moving left to right, between 1989 and 1998, middle class wealth grew at a faster pace than it did for the wealthy classes. So you could argue that the middle classes were gaining ground between 89 and 98. However, that changed in 1998, leading up to the Great Recession. So that's the middle chart. And you can see that, they've actually excluded the poorest group. That would be the first fifth. So really it's the second, third, fourth, fifth, and then they've broken out the top 5%. And this is where I start to sound like Bernie Sanders, like the top 5% of the top 20%. So I don't want to get too crazy with the numbers, but you can see that between 98 and the Great Recession, that sort of growth pattern changed, right? And so now you're seeing more income growth amongst the richest. And it's a pretty straightforward chart. I mean, it's pretty much equal. As you go up in wealth, you're gaining more wealth over time. And then maybe most interesting of all, this is getting us closer to the current period we're in. Since the Great Recession, only the richest Americans have gained wealth, right? So most of us have not gained wealth since then. So that's the graph on the far right. So anyway, this is interesting, right? And it kind of puts it into perspective. If it feels like, and I'm not a politician, but if it feels like, the rich are getting richer and the rest of us are struggling, this chart's a pretty good, indicator that that's the case. And it hasn't always been this way, right? So that first graph shows that at least during that 10-year period, things were growing in a different way. So anyway, some context. I know this is getting a little heavy, but I promise to get back to the library world in a minute. Okay, and this is the last graphic along these lines. This graphic, the change in median household income for upper, middle, and lower class individuals over time. So on the right, you can see very graphically how the poor have remained poor and how the middle class has lost income share to the wealthy class, more or less at a 1-to-1 ratio. So those sort of intersecting lines, the yellow line and the green line, you can see that, as upper income folks have carved out more income, it's decreased almost proportionally, directly proportionate to middle income folks losing income. So, that's a very compelling graphic if you want to look at it that way. And so it kind of shows you what's happening over time. All right. And this is something that I'm not sure, maybe you guys all know about this already, but this has been a really interesting tool that I think I've known about it for maybe a year or two, but it's called the Opportunity Atlas. So what I haven't touched on yet is geography. Geography is incredibly important in determining how people's quality of life ends up. Right? Even just living, one zip code over can impact your life in significant and lasting ways. It could be something like a predictor of your earnings, your educational level, your access to healthcare, even your life expectancy. So it's not one of these situations where, well, North Carolina compares favorably or not favorably to, New Jersey. You can get down in this Opportunity Atlas to zip codes, and you can actually see, if a child is born in the zip code just over there across the river or whatever, he or she may have a much different life. On average, there are always exceptions, but on average, their life might turn out a lot differently than someone in your zip code, just based on geography, because that implies so much. It implies school systems and the hospital you might go to, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, I wanted to give a plug to this Opportunity Atlas. It's really interesting, and if you want to do more research about specifically how geography impacts folks and how geography plays a role in equality or inequality, it's a really interesting tool. All right, and so what I've done so far is I'm trying to start from the biggest possible picture and then hone in. So we're going to get a little more specific. But basically, I've skimmed some of the high-level ways that we can measure financial inequality. But we shouldn't forget that this isn't just a bunch of charts and graphs. These graphs and charts represent real people. And so these are people that may come into your library, people that you see when you are in your communities. You know, they're the ones that are represented by these, and they have, you know, real personal stories about inequality. So, you know, it's worth mentioning that inequality or, you know, being in a particular socioeconomic class, these have real impacts on people. Things like food insecurity and homelessness and, you know, being imprisoned while you await trial because you can't afford bail, you know, restricted access to doctors. I mean, the list goes on. But these are a little more personal ways of thinking about inequality. I think the charts are helpful, but it's really important to remember that people are being affected in very personal ways, and these are just a handful. I could go on, but those are some ways that they're affected. Okay, so that was the first section. So things look, here we go. I don't want to depress you on a Friday. So the next few slides are on the extent of the digital divide. And I feel more comfortable presenting these because I'm not an economist and I'm not a sociologist, I'm a librarian. So I'm starting to feel more comfortable with the material. But it is helpful to have that context, more specifically about the digital divide. And you know, if you research the digital divide, there are lots of ways to talk about it. I've narrowed it down to 3. So these are the 3 facets of the digital divide that I'll cover. One is connectivity, right? So having access to high-speed internet. The second is the access to usable devices. I think you'll hear about usable devices in at least one of the sessions later today. It's true that most folks have a cell phone nowadays, regardless of class, but that's not really a usable device if you're trying to do something like homework, right? It can be helpful, but to try to, you know, attend even a Zoom meeting might be a little tricky, but to try to do homework, to try to, you know, interact with classmates, it's incredibly difficult on a phone. So when we talk about usable devices, we're really talking about something like a laptop. You know, that's still kind of the standard for online learning. And then the third category that I wrote down was digital skills. This is, you know, the ability, so let's say I have connectivity, I have a usable device. Now do I have the skills to navigate this world, navigate the information that's available to me? If I'm a K through 12 student and I'm trying to learn at home and my parents working, you know, outside the home, can I do it, right? Can I be successful without a teacher there to help me? Those are just some examples of digital skills. So yeah, let's talk about these in some more detail. So I'm gonna start with connectivity. This is a map of broadband availability in North Carolina. And the color coding is pretty straightforward. The tan areas are where high-speed internet is not available. So even if you had the money and you were ready to subscribe, pay a cable company or somebody to give you high-speed internet, these are areas that are kind of like blackout areas for broadband. The other thing to mention is even if, you know, you look at an area and you're like, oh, great, you know, Hickory's green, that's awesome, that's where I live. This is really just availability. It has nothing to do with a person's ability to pay for it, right? So this basically means that the local cable company may offer high-speed internet, but if it's $60 a month, you still have to have $60 a month, right? But nonetheless, this is an interesting kind of way to look at our state. And at this time, when I pulled it, I want to say this was maybe a couple years ago, but at this time, 15% of households with school-age children had no high-speed internet. So that's a very high number. If you think about what's happening now during COVID, these are households that, whether it's because it's not available or they simply can't afford it, these are areas where school children can't do their work. They're just not able to log on. So anyway, that's one way to look at it from a connectivity perspective. Also, you've probably seen some scenes like this where you know, folks are without internet. Perhaps, you know, they were relying on their school or they were relying on their library. to get access. And, you know, a lot of our buildings have either closed or they have very limited hours now because of COVID. And so you're seeing these scenes, and it's you know, it can be really sad to see all these cars, you know, surrounding, say, the public library, so they can pick up the Wi-Fi signal, and you see kids in the back seat doing their homework. I mean, it's really kind of wild to see those scenes, you know, especially when you think of the U.S. It's a very odd sight to see how folks are having to rely on basically, you know, whoever's leaving their public Wi-Fi on to do things like do their homework, or as adults, you know, pay your bills. So I have a great niece. I know I'm too young to have a great niece, but I have a great niece whose name is Hope, who's in middle school, and she lives in Ohio. And I knew she had a choice. She could either go back to physical school, or she could do remote learning, and she chose remote learning. Now, her school system gave all the kids Chromebooks, so they had a usable device to do their homework, but they made no concessions for internet access. And, you know, Hope's mom, they didn't have it in the house. They didn't have internet access. They just sort of used their phones like a lot of folks do. And so, you know, there was no discount given because it's for a kid trying to do her schoolwork. And so basically, Hope's mom is working extra hours to pay for the internet bill, which is not the saddest story. I'm not trying to paint it that way, but it's just one example of how, you know, having access to broadband is one thing, paying for it's another. And when your child has to learn remotely, you know, you really don't have a choice. You have to figure it out somehow, or, you know, pull up next to a building like this, which is a really difficult situation. All right, so a couple of local stories. You know, usable devices have really become a hot topic because of the sudden shift to virtual learning. So because of COVID, we had this profound shift, right? That everyone that was going to school, or most of them, had to at least temporarily figure out how to learn remotely. And if you didn't already have a usable device, you had to find one. So a lot of public school systems ordered devices for their students, but the supply chain was unprepared for that kind of demand. So the companies that make things like Chromebook, they just never anticipated such a spike in demand. And the school systems that were relying on federal relief funding ended up last in line, right? Because you remember the CARES Act and how the federal government passed that. But while we were waiting for that to get done, you know, other people, more wealthy school districts were ordering things like Chromebooks. So by the time, you know, less well-funded school systems had access to the federal aid money, you know, it was like you're getting last in line, right? So the folks that make those had a backlog. So Guilford County is a good example. They spent $27 million to purchase 66,000 devices. And I think I checked this maybe a week or so ago, so it could have changed. I think they were due sometime in October, but as of, I'll just say mid-October, they hadn't arrived yet. So students have been trying to learn at home, you know, using whatever they have. And the young man pictured here, his name is Raymond. He had to share his family iPad with 3 siblings until eventually he was able to get a laptop. And again, that's just a really difficult way to do homework and try to keep up. And you're putting a lot of folks, especially folks that are lower income, in a much more difficult situation when it comes to student success. Okay, and to put a number on this, I've started with a personal story, but about 25% of low-income teens, for example, have access to a computer at home. So that gives you some sense. Now, because of COVID, many of them may have been given one from their school system, but at least when this data was captured a few years ago, about a quarter of low-income teens didn't have a computer at home. That gives you some sense of the extent of the issue. And then some people have both issues, right? So a lack of usable devices. So the person pictured here is named Michelle. She was a community college student in California who was struggling to follow online classes through her smartphone, which makes a lot of sense. It's hard to do your work through a tiny screen. And she had no laptop and no Wi-Fi at home. The library that she had depended on for Wi-Fi at the community college was closed. So 2 weeks into the shutdown in the spring, she dropped all of our courses to avoid failing. She didn't want to, you know, get the failures on her record. So this is, it's one person, but this is an example of what happens when you don't have access to the internet and you don't have a usable device to follow along. And so a couple other points on this before we move on. Even if you have connectivity and you have a usable device, for most folks, this online learning has not been very satisfying. I mean, some people like it, I'm sure, but you hear a lot of folks that both teachers and students are really struggling with it. Teachers are saying that the students, are reporting feeling disconnected. There's a lot of absenteeism. They're struggling sometimes with the technology. If they don't have, say it's a K through 12 student that doesn't have a parent around, they can struggle with the technology. And just a quote or a couple quotes that I'll share. The one on the screen is from a college student who said, I feel like I don't, this is such a college student way of framing it, I feel like I don't know a bunch of stuff that's going on. 2 of my classes don't meet unless you have questions, which is just kind of dumbfounding to me because I'm paying all of this money for office hours. If I wanted to teach myself these classes, I would have just bought the book, which I think you can relate to. And we'll look in just a second at some of the enrollment numbers and the changes that we've seen because of situations like this, where students and the parents of college students are questioning, why am I paying all this money for an experience that's been, deprecated because of COVID? And so, yeah, and the other quote that I'll share is from a K through 12 teacher who reported that a lot of his students are, unable to follow along. I'll just quote him. We know this isn't a good way to teach. We want to hold kids accountable. We want to see their progress, be in the classroom with them and see them struggle and overcome that. Instead, we are logging in for an hour a day and kids are turning their cameras off and staying quiet and not talking to us. So, that's more of a teacher perspective. But yeah, it's just worth noting that, even if you have all the technology and you have a reliable high-speed internet connection, this is still not the type of learning that most folks would prefer. And then finally, some good news. I need to sprinkle in more good news. This is an article from just about a week ago, I think, and it has to do with digital skills. So we've talked about connectivity, we've talked about usable devices, and we've also, talked about interactivity. And the other part is really digital skills. So we know that, being online, having access to a usable device isn't enough. It doesn't guarantee success. Students have to learn the digital skills to navigate the digital landscape. And so recently, Winston-Salem State was one of, I believe, 4 HBCUs that received a grant from Google. It's the Grow with Google program. And it's to really help them work with students to build digital skills. So I know this isn't exactly the digital divide that most of us are talking about today, but this is just as relevant. Access is one thing, being able to be successful in the digital landscape is another. And so I was really excited to see that for Winston-Salem State. They're a great institution, and yeah, I'm curious to hear how it goes, and I think it's a great program. Okay, so I've been focusing pretty much all my attention on the impact of this inequality and the digital divide on individuals, not really on institutions. So I saw a study come out, I want to say 2 weeks ago, and it's specific to North Carolina. And so this fall in North Carolina, first-time college enrollment is down 16% at 4-year institutions and almost 22.7% at community colleges. And so this was, this was not entirely surprising. I'm a little surprised at the community college number. I've always been told, when the economy is in a downturn, community college enrollment goes up. And when the economy is humming, community college enrollment goes down. I think the logic is, if the economy's down, people perhaps are laid off or they're looking to switch careers. And so they want to learn new skills, right, to re-enter the workforce in a different job. I think maybe perhaps, and feel free to comment because you guys probably know more than I do, but maybe because this downturn was so sudden and it really wasn't, we had furloughs, not layoffs necessarily. Maybe some of that uncertainty made folks be more patient and say, well, maybe my job will come back because I've only been furloughed, I've not been laid off. There may be more to it, but anyway, these are the numbers for North Carolina. And I think I've alluded to it already, but the four-year college experience, especially at private schools, I've talked to a number of deans and directors who have reported enrollment numbers being down. And basically, you know, college students that sometimes pay for the tuition, just questioning, is it worth paying whatever room and board and tuition is at a private school if really my son or daughter is in their bedroom, you know, doing all this online? So I think that has a lot to do with it. And some folks are just punting for a year. You know, they're going to say, I'll take a gap year and come back, hopefully when things are better next year. But anyway, North Carolina, so you can see that, you know, all of this is impacting institutions as well. Okay, and so this is kind of a summary, but basically 6 in 10 lower income children are impacted by a lack of connectivity, a lack of a usable device, or both. So that puts some number on how many folks are impacted by at least one of these things. All right, so we're in the home stretch. So my big question is, okay, that wasn't great. So does it have to be this way? Or is the digital divide inevitable? I don't think so. I think the answer is no. But I think to eliminate the digital divide, we would have to see some significant changes in our society. And again, not advocating for these things. I'm simply saying that if the problem of the digital divide is much broader than just connectivity and access to usable devices, if it's really about systemic inequality, then that's a huge issue, right? And no sort of local program to give every school kid a computer is going to fix those really big issues. So, you know, these are things that come up every election cycle, it seems like, but I think it's worth mentioning. Like if we, as a country, if we tackle pick three of these things, I think you would see the digital divide shrink quite a bit. We hear a lot about universal basic income. So if every family had at least the means to survive and to have a necessity, I know Canada is actually getting more and more serious about this. They've done some smaller projects, some regional projects that had promising results, but I think Trudeau and that regime, they're actually thinking about this on a national level, and so it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. But that's one example that could really make a dent in the digital divide. Tax reform. So we've seen how sort of the middle class and the upper class, how that is trending. So obviously, if you know, taxes were more equitably distributed, then some of that tax dollars could be applied to something like broadband or devices for all school kids. Of course, there's racial and gender inequality that needs to be sorted out. There's you know, the role of money in politics, right? So as long as not just individuals but corporations, you know, are really supporting candidates, right, and influencing policy, that's always going to be an issue. And then it seems like, yeah, definitely every presidential cycle we hear about everyone should go to college for free, and people seem excited by that, but it never happens. So that would be another example of, you know, if everyone could go to college for free, then you know, it wouldn't be a stretch to make sure they had a device to use and internet access. So anyway, these are huge ideas. This is, you know, this is not for me to talk about, especially on a Friday, but I think these are some examples of things that could make a dent for the entire US, right? These are sort of big picture solutions. And I showed you this already, but I just want to reiterate, this is where we are. This is like our report card, which is not great. So if these ideas seem really giant and dramatic, it's kind of because we're in last place, right? So we need to do something dramatic to get out of that. Okay, and so when you think about changes that could be made, often you'll encounter quick fixes. So especially from politicians, they'll say, okay, let's throw some money at this problem, this digital divide thing I keep hearing about. Here's some money, let me write a check, and that'll fix it. But rarely does that actually succeed. So I wanted to give you just one example of how quick fixes I shouldn't say it that way. Often quick fixes don't have the intended solution. So let's think about the money we all got during COVID, right? Remember the checks, I think $1,200 or so, everyone got a check for $1,200 or whatever was proportional to their tax return. And this was stimulus money, right? So really the purpose was the economy is in a really tough situation. Let's write, you know, almost all Americans a check, and then they can spend that money and it'll sort of jumpstart the economy. So enough time has passed that we can actually look back and see, did that work? Did it accomplish the goal? And so interestingly, only 29% of the money that was received from the Federal Reserve was actually spent, right? So it was actually, used to buy groceries or whatever folks needed. 35% was used to pay down debt, which is sort of a way of spending, but you're not really getting ahead. You're just paying in arrears for what you owe. So really, and then 36% of the cash was saved. So those are people that, maybe they hadn't lost their job or they had a sufficient bank account, so they just put that away in savings. So really, if the intention was to, put money in people's pockets so they spend it, only about 29% actually got spent. And I think this is where this can be a lesson. These quick fixes where a check, it sounds good, and I'm sure we all cash the check, so we're not arguing with that. But it really ignores where people are, right? So if you're already in debt, it's great to get this one-time infusion of money, but at the end of that, you're still in debt. Maybe by a little bit less, but you're still in debt. You haven't really fixed the issue. And if you're spending it, that means you were basically just getting by, right? You really needed that money to pay your bills or pay your rent. And then the folks that already had money socked it away, right? So they have more. So it kind of doesn't make for a more equal society. It really just sort of perpetuates the groups that are already there and where they are. So anyway, I hope that makes sense. I was just trying to illustrate this with okay, so this is a quote, and I don't agree with the quote, but I want to use it to make a point. So let me read it. You take all the people on Earth and divide up everything, and in 6 months, everybody would have just about what they have now. This is a quote. It's from a short story. It's not even like an economist, but I think it really does a good job of summarizing what a lot of people believe, which is that these one-time handouts or sort of dividing things up, it doesn't work because the folks that are receiving it often are already in a hole. They're already in debt. Just like we saw in the last example, right? A one-time payment doesn't really change someone's life. The other reason it doesn't work is that, throwing money at something doesn't really get at the systemic issues, right? Writing a check doesn't solve racism. Writing a check doesn't solve, gender inequality. And things like financial management, right? So some of us learn this from our families, how to manage your household income. We learn about personal investment or personal finance. Those are lessons that help us figure out how to spend and invest money. So without that educational aspect, throwing money at stuff doesn't usually work. So anyway, again, I don't agree with the quote, but I'm just saying this is something that people often, and I think it does sort of point at quick fixes. Writing checks rarely actually does it solve systemic issues. I'm a real downer today. I've got to lighten up. All right, solutions. So for now, because I don't think those big solutions, gosh, I've already forgotten my solutions. Let me go back. Some of those big solutions like universal basic income, tax reform, I don't think any of those are on the horizon. So, unless you guys know better, let me know if those are about to happen. So short of those really big systemic changes, I think right now, when we're thinking about the digital divide, the solutions are local, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think you can get things done a lot faster at a local level than you can at a state or a national level. So that's the positive. So here are some things that we could do, and perhaps you're already doing these things. We could think about devices for all students. So this is an initiative that a library could take the on campus. I'm not saying you have the money for it, but you could definitely start a movement. Maybe you partner with Campus IT or the Office for Student Success. But now might be a great time to say, there's an impetus for us to ensure that all of our students have a device. And if they don't, we should give them one. And this reminded me, this is way back in my career, but one of my first jobs out of grad school was at a college in Massachusetts called Bentley. So it's Bentley College in Waltham, Massachusetts. And it's really primarily a business school. But I remember getting there and they said, and this would have been like 2003, maybe 2003. But I remember I got hired there and they said, oh, Bentley is really known for giving all of our students a portable computer, or at that time, a laptop. And, you know, if you're a Bentley student, we just give you one. It's part of, you know, we pay for it out of your fees or whatever, but we make sure that every student has one. And I said, oh, that's a really cool program. When did you start that? And they said 1985. So since 1985, and they are the first. And you can see the poor female student carrying all of her portable devices. I think it's pretty awesome. It's kind of bold to call that portable, but anyway, every student would go and pick up their computer and printer and all that. But since '85, they just saw the importance of everyone having a usable device. And the thing on the right, I don't know what that is, either the fashion or the thing he's typing on. Someone from the '80s needs to fill me in on what's going on in that picture. So anyway, so that's one thing that we could all do, you know, on campuses, is we can lead that effort, you know, and say, okay, this is so critical that we need to partner with the right folks on campus to see. And, you know, if Bentley could do it in '85, right, we would be able to do it now. Other things that we could, you know, take the lead on: municipal broadband. So if it's not available, who could we partner with in our communities to make sure that broadband is available, especially in rural areas that don't have it? Device lending, hotspot lending. I know these are things that have smaller lifts, so I know a lot of you guys are doing these already, and I'll show a few examples in a second. So these are just some solutions. I mean, there's nothing groundbreaking here, and I encourage you guys to share now or throughout the day other potential solutions to close the digital divide. But anyway, I wanted to give you at least some context. So yeah, help mostly is local. So I introduced you to Raymond earlier. He did get a laptop eventually, but to a teacher at a school and a local church, right? So this is where we are. I mean, again, I don't mean to be too negative, but I don't foresee the digital divide being closed at the federal level. Probably not at the state level, although there is one example at least that I'll share in a second where there is some good work there. So in the immediate future, I think we just have to look for local solutions. Okay, so let's talk about broadband. So if you're not familiar with NCDIT, they're doing some really great work, community by community, to expand broadband. So that's their focus right now. It's one of the work they do. I know I've been to conferences where they present on their progress, and it's really exciting when they come to a community and start to figure out how to set up broadband. I mean, it's amazing work that they're doing. So you should at least be aware of NCDIT and what they do. On the left, I just snipped this from the News and Observer on October 11th. It's an opinion, a little biased, but it does refer back to when cable companies, a long time ago, they blocked municipalities from building their own broadband in certain communities. And basically they said, you know, this is our territory. But the cable companies never built the broadband because it wasn't profitable, because there wasn't enough population density. So the people that live there are kind of left in the lurch, right? The cable company isn't going to set up shop because it's not going to make them any money. And their cities are, you know, their hands are tied. They can't do it themselves. So there's some movement and some talk about, you know, somehow filling those gaps and either lifting that restriction or finding some clever way to get around it. So that's worth looking at if you live in an area that doesn't have broadband. You know, it's interesting to know there's some history there, and there might be a reason that cable companies and your city haven't done that yet. On the right, hopefully this isn't mirrored, but NC State's Friday Institute, I think it's next week, they have a session all about rural broadband, and there's some speakers there that know a lot more than I do about it and can give you the latest on what's happening. So I'll give a plug to that, and I encourage you guys to go to it. And maybe most important of all, if you guys haven't heard of My Future NC, I encourage you to check that out. They're very politically connected. They've got funding, they've got, you know, great support from leaders across, you know, across the state. So look at their website. I mean, currently their main goal is to ensure that 2 million North Carolina residents have a high quality credential or a post-secondary degree by 2030. That's like their really big goal. And I don't know that broadband is like a specific goal or contributing goal now, but it could be. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense if you're trying to make sure that many folks across the state, have a credential or a degree. I think you have to overcome some of these digital divide barriers. So check out the website. I mean, I know a few folks on their board, and you may know them as well, but any kind of advocacy you can do would be really smart, I think, because again, if our goal of closing the digital divide can help their goal of making sure 2 million people have a degree, if those align, I think we could get some traction and they could start to invest funds in it. So I know it's a lot of information. I just wanted to give you a sense of the landscape. All right, so just a couple more slides. One thing we can do right now, and I think a lot of you do this already, is lending technology. So this is NC State's library. This is a snapshot of their page. This is something that if you have the funding, this is awesome. Especially now, students really, really need it. So this is one example of how you can make sure folks have usable devices for a specific period of time. And then of course, hotspots. I know at NC Live, we worked out a discount program with Verizon where, if libraries want to purchase hotspots and then loan them out, they'll get a discount. So that's another example of how you can help. All right, and you'll find more solutions. I didn't want to try to give you 100 solutions, but I think throughout the day at the other sessions, you're going to hear about some other potential solutions. So do stick around. I know it's a Friday, but the weather doesn't seem that great. So stick around. Where else do you have to go? Okay, so in conclusion, I hope this context is useful. I know it was really broad and not a lot to do with libraries at first, but I hope kind of thinking about inequality in a broader sense informs what you do in the digital divide space. And as you participate in today's sessions, please keep that context in mind. I think that, whatever solution that you come up with, that's going to inform them. And even though, a really big, well-funded solution is probably not on its way, I think we can each make a difference today, right? In our local communities, on our local campuses, there are things we can do now that'll make an impact to people's lives. So I encourage you guys not to give up hope and not to wait for, the federal government to do anything. We just sort of need to fix it ourselves as best we can. So I encourage you guys to do that as much as you can. And obviously, if NC Live can help, if you see a role for us, please let us know. We obviously provide a lot of content, but I'm sure there are other things we could do. So don't be shy about telling us what we can do. All right, breathlessly, I'm out. I'm out of time. So thank you. I know we have some time for questions. Happy to answer questions for a few minutes if you like.
You can enter your questions in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask questions, whatever you prefer.
And Don, if you see any in chat, I've got like 1,000 devices going on. Just feel free to
I'm taking it. They're all just saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. Great presentation.
Okay, cool.
And it was a great presentation. It really puts everything into context. And I think you did a great job of addressing all the different types of libraries that are affected by the digital divide.
I have a technical question. Will all the presentations be on the same Zoom link?
Yes, just one link for everything.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, cool. And I'm looking back at the chat, and thank you guys for adding links to certain things. So I think we've read some of the same New York Times articles. So thanks for doing that.
There's a lot in the news about it, a lot of things to kind of keep up with. The Opportunity Atlas to me was something I'd never heard of. I thought that was very interesting and something to be aware of, for sure. All right. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this session up. And the next one we have coming up is at 10 o'clock. It's Alan Unsworth, Building a Digital Library Consortium, and that's sponsored by the Community and Junior College Library section. So we'll take a brief break and come back at 10 o'clock. All right, thank you all.
Okay, we'll get started with the second session. If everyone can hear, I will. Okay, good.
Hear you.
All right, good deal. I will begin my session. So I guess I'm representing the college and community college or junior college section of NCLA. I'm the membership director for the Western region of NCLA. I'm also, my job is Director of Academic Support and Research at Surrey Community College. So I am invested in the community college system, and I've been around for a while. I was the president of their association and been kicking around the system for a little while now. And I want to talk a little bit about a current project that I'm working on with another librarian in the system to build a consortium so we can afford to purchase popular fiction and young adult titles in electronic format for our students, because the most highly used area of our collection, in spite of us being an academic library. So we wanted to figure out a way of making those materials available during COVID. And, you know, in general, it was a driving, it was a big problem in our lives, was how are we going to figure out how to provide these materials to our students in an affordable way? So recently, I guess to bridge the digital divide, this is one thing we've been doing. And I know a lot of us have been doing a lot of different things like, you know, drive-through services, adding maybe some databases to your collection, meeting with students or with your patrons through Zoom and other sort of formats. And in general, I think people have done a pretty good job of trying to meet and replicate those services through a virtual format. But one big gap that we found in the community college area was, again, like this, we have this large area of heavily used books, and they're popular books and they're expensive to buy in ebook format. So how can we afford, as community colleges, we don't have a very big budget at all, to bring these books in ebook format to our students who are not virtually or not physically on campus? So we decided to build a consortium. And with like print circulations just down in general. So we actually had a few different motivating factors previous to COVID that kind of built upon each other. So this is kind of what I'm going to talk about today. First is like the motivating factors behind. I've kind of hinted at those already. Why would you build a consortium in your community of interest or your group of libraries? Why would you do that to begin with? Why don't we take Overdrive out of other vendors? I'll talk about, you know, the public libraries are already doing a lot of this, and this really was our example, and we built off what they've done. So some of you guys from public libraries are already familiar with maybe the front end, maybe the back end, depending on your job. So we'll talk about like kind of how the public libraries inspired us and provided a model. And then like some of the big things are, how are you going to recruit members for this? Like you can have this great idea, but how are you going to actually bring people in to join you? Because that obviously is how you're going to build a collection. That's obviously how you're going to build buy-in, gain credibility, and, you know, create something that can move forward in the future. And then I'll talk a little bit about like how we decided to build the structure of the organization. That again was heavily influenced by Publix, but we'll talk about that later. We had some really good examples. Luckily, we have some great examples in this state of people that have been doing this thing in the academic and the public library and the school library communities of interest. Okay, so previous to all of this, you know, 2020 stuff, I've been thinking for years, how are we going to provide, first off, the platform, and then second off, the books that students want? Because, you know, NC Live provides a lot of nonfiction academic-y titles for us for free. And we can buy databases of books from EBSCO, ProQuest, other vendors at reasonable costs. We have a pretty small FTE, which is how our, you know, our contract will be based, our invoicing will be based. So those are not a problem, but our students, they really want more of an, they want to be able to also come to us for their popular reading needs. And that's what we're circulating. And with print circulation going down, we really were relying heavily on the print young adult fiction titles. And we didn't really have a good way of doing that anyway, because RB Digital was not really a satisfactory platform. We didn't feel like we were adding some titles there, and some community college libraries were adding titles to RB Digital. That's our free ebook platform that we have through NC Live. But it really wasn't satisfactory, and we didn't think that was like a real good option going forward. So we were kind of stuck in the middle, like, should we just, kind of invest in RB Digital? Should we just not even pursue this? It's not our charge, right, as an academic library to worry about young adult and popular reading. So should we even invest in this? Is this even part of what we should be doing? I definitely felt like it was something we should be doing. But so on top of this kind of building feeling of how are we going to deal with this problem, RB Digital merged with Overdrive, or Overdrive bought RB Digital, whatever you want to say. RB Digital's gone, right? And so Overdrive took over that company. So when that happened, we knew we were losing that free platform from NC Live, and NC Live has since replaced. We can talk later about, NC Live replaced RB Digital, hopefully with, it looks like, Hoopla, which would be a step up. But in that intervening kind of period, we were like, wow, we are really left with nothing. We don't know where we're going to turn at all. So when that happened, myself and Joel Ferndon, who's at Stanley Community College, we kind of joined forces and said, what should we do about this? And Joel has a background with Publix, and he knew, and I knew through some committee work I'd done, Ruth Ann Copley, who was very influential with the public libraries. We'll talk about that later. But we thought, well, maybe we should just, go all in and go with this Overdrive like the public libraries have. So that was sort of the initial thought. And then we also had at the same time the COVID and online learning that was coming in, and we were seeing a huge decrease. People, obviously, we were shut down for a while, so we weren't checking books out. Students were going online, so our popular reading was not getting touched, period. It really wasn't. I mean, like what NC Live has, like homegrown books through their, BiblioBoard platform, which is another, option that we had, but BiblioBoard doesn't have a large catalog. It really wasn't a viable alternative. So we had these kind of three things, like our own, like driving force beforehand was like, how are we going to handle this in the future? RB stinks. Then RB Digital's gone. Wow, we have nothing. And then COVID on top of that, we were like, we've got to do something now. And so we decided to move ahead, trying to do something. So our next step really was to select a vendor. And there are different vendors, right? I mean, you've seen, I'm sure in some in Publix have seen Hoopla and Overdrive. Those are the kind of the two big kind of Amazon-y ones that are out there. We really relied upon the Publix for this. Ruth Ann, with her experience, we knew that they had a really positive experience, and we built upon the relationship with Ruth Ann and her connections with Overdrive. So one big, learning thing for us was the importance of those relationships, because she set us up with a great rep at Overdrive, who really gave us a great deal and made it really simple. And they had experience dealing with libraries in North Carolina, not so much community college libraries. That was a new thing for them, and it's kind of a learning process for both us and them, because they haven't dealt with consortium and academic realms very much. So we felt like we're kind of pioneering some of this, but we did feel like Overdrive, it was pretty easy to learn. Hoopla is another one that is pretty easy to learn, and their app is very good. But we felt like the Libby app, especially, Overdrive has two apps, Overdrive and Libby. We felt like those apps were really pretty easy to learn, especially Libby. And we felt like the models and the catalog that Overdrive push were more for our benefit. I think Hoopla relies more on a rental leasing service. with unlimited checkouts, which is great, or with unlimited like use and stuff. But Overdrive was more of a permanent catalog we could build up. We felt like that was the model. And we also felt like Libby was something that was already established in the state. So and Overdrive was already established. So our heavy library users already have library cards from public libraries, and they're already kind of in this. So it would take away a lot of the instructional, like the teaching we would have to do to get people to learn. And also people would see, you know, our promotional materials for Libby and be like, oh yeah, I know how to do that. And they can just, you know, add it to their Libby app and bam. They're connected not only to the public library, but also to the community college library. So we really were trying to like join forces with Publix, which is kind of an ongoing theme in the community colleges. We really are joining forces with Publix a lot more in a lot of different ways that are upcoming. But this is one of our first attempts. So that ability to talk to libraries was really great for us because we knew that our heavy library users were already using Libby. So that was sort of we could integrate ourselves into their library lives. And if you haven't used Libby or Hoopla, they're both really good apps, and they're very similar to what, you know, anyone that would be using an ebook app would be like, oh yeah, it's pretty simple to, you know, figure it out. So we really like that. We like that Overdrive really is a technology company first. That's how they push themselves. Like they build technology and then the books come second. So we felt like Overdrive was a company that would be there in the future. Like they're always going to be enhancing their apps and staying on top of technology, which was really something we wanted because at the community college level, if you ever looked at a community college, like the book catalog, it's really bad. Almost every community college has a really obscure, old, out of date book catalog. And so one thing we've always struggled with is just sort of building that reputation off of like branding and the way we look. And it's always sort of an embarrassment for the community college libraries. We have great staff and great librarians, but we have these inferior products that we're kind of given. And this would be a way for us to step in the market of professional modern technology. So that was another thing for me that was really attractive, was to push community colleges. Hey, we're not these podunk little institutions with terrible technology. We're at we're trying to be at the forefront or near the forefront as much as we can be with technology in libraries and providing things people want. Another thing that is relevant to this is that community colleges have a smaller, just a core base of users. So the Publix have, you know, large swaths of public, you know, just people, community, people that, you know, state residents that they serve. So their potential user base is massive. Our potential user base potentially is massive depending on each library's like who they allow to borrow. But in general, our user base is tied primarily to our affiliates, our current affiliates. So we're looking at a much smaller user base. So our idea was if we can just get like half of the community colleges, and there's 58 community colleges, if you can believe, that's like the second largest in the country. It's a huge base of colleges. If we can get half of them to join and start buying ebooks and sharing them, we're going to build up a massive collection, and our user base is so little that we're going to be able to provide books people want with a very limited or no hold sort of backlog. So one of the big problems that people have with the Publix is that, yeah, they provide great books. I want this book, but I have to wait. And so we thought if we can do the same thing at the community college level, our user base is so much smaller, we're going to have less demand. So people that want the books are going to be able to get their hands on the books. Maybe they have to wait like one person instead of like 7 in the public library sphere. And we'll talk more about the public libraries in a second, because obviously I've mentioned they were a huge influence on us. And Overdrive has a huge, I'm not trying to hawk for Overdrive, but I'm just trying to explain our thinking here. They have a large audio and ebook catalog, and we felt like the catalog was probably better than Hoopla. superior. We also felt like Overdrive really is a trustworthy company. A lot of the reps that are there and people that are there have been there from the beginning. And even the owner's wife is a librarian, and the owner is known to be super great working with libraries and making as many exceptions as they can. And they understand like our needs. They hire librarians that work with Overdrive. So we felt it was more of a librarian-y sort of vendor rather than just some business people trying to make money. And that was the feeling we got the whole way. In fact, when we dealt with our rep, he was like the third guy in charge of the company, and he didn't even have to ask permission. We made some changes to the contract. He just made them like on the spot as we were negotiating, and he was just like, sure, that's good, that's good. So it was a really good experience. And again, we believe that Overdrive provides kind of the best like stable platform in the future. So we decided, let's go with Overdrive. The publics are using it. We think it's going to be sort of the model for the future. And also Overdrive connects with Kindle. So if you want to use a Kindle book, most of the books will go over to Kindle as well. So there's a lot of like transference that works with almost every major like ebook platform. So that was another thing. All right, so one of the big things, we really owe a debt of gratitude to the public libraries who kind of were the inspiration for all of this. And they've been doing this for years. But the public libraries have set up 3 major consortium, and all this was really done with the primary force being a retired librarian, Ruth Ann Copley. And I knew her from being with NC Live as the representative on NC Live's board for many years. And so I met her and we talked about a lot of these issues with their consortium. Joel Fernan, who helped me with a lot of this, he was in the public libraries for a long time, so he knew the back end. He also knew Ruth Ann from committee work. So they've built 3 consortia in the state. And you're probably part of one of these, or maybe you use one of these. The NC Kids is free for anybody in the state, and these are all Overdrive affiliated consortia. NC Kids is just nckids.overdrive.com, and anybody in the state can access free kids books, unlimited access on almost all those titles all the time. And that's just a fabulous resource. I mean, there's books where that's audiobooks, there's ebooks, there's read-along books. So you can just literally sit there and have a book read to your kid and, kind of sit there as they're going to sleep. It's fantastic. There's also the North Carolina Digital Library, which is where a lot of public libraries fit. And there's also e-Ink, which is a separate consortia, I think for, I'm not sure if it's smaller or it's just a separate public library group, but they're all affiliated with Overdrive directly. So we pulled so much information from these people. So first off, we had familiarity. Joel had familiarity with the back end of dealing with Overdrive with e-Ink, which was one he worked with. We also had familiarity with their catalog. So we knew the functionality of that. We also we had a basis for the bylaws. Oh, sorry, I got muted there. Hang on one second. Sorry about that. We knew that we could work with Overdrive on the contract, and we had Ruth Ann help us build that initial contract from her previous experiences with North Carolina Digital Library and e-Ink. So we really leaned on them. And also their bylaws, we just built off their bylaws. We took their bylaws and we tweaked them to fit our model. So again, these connections with people is really how we built up a lot of this consortia, was knowing people and making those connections and using that. Also, the policies that we have in our consortium are, again, taken mainly from them. We look at their examples for things like checkout periods. How long are you going to check out an ebook? How long you can check out an audiobook? How many audiobooks can they check out? How many ebooks can they check out? Those sort of things we all borrowed from them and their example and their experiences. What was the problems? What were the things what were the problems they ran up with? So we really learned a lot from them. And I think we're going to avoid a lot of the pitfalls by learning from them. So if you're thinking about doing something similar to this, I would look to the Publix, or if that's not the example that you're trying to build, if you're trying to do something more academic oriented, look to other states and see what they've done. You know, contact the consortia like NC Live, but similar NC Live in a different state, and see if they have examples of things in their state. I really recommend that, because I mean, we really just, so much of what we have done has been facilitated because of the public library experience. And Overdrive was familiar with people, and they were willing to work with us a lot because they didn't want to deal with academics, but because Ruth Ann stuck up for us and said they need your help, they were just like, okay, well, we'll make some exceptions. And they made a lot of exceptions because we really were outside of their model. And also the structure of the organization that we built, and I'll talk about that in a minute, is very similar to what the public libraries have done, like their, executive board. How are you going to run this consortia? We look to them for that. Okay, so this is a big one, recruiting members. So once we sort of had the idea and we have kind of initial contract in place, my big anxiety was, how are we going to get other people to buy into this? Because I mean, I know a lot of people in the community college system, but we also have super limited budgets, and there's probably, there's skepticism amongst, a lot of healthy skepticism amongst a lot of librarians in the system. They have limited money. Should we really be spending the money on this sort of materials? So I was worried, like, are we going to just start this thing up and we're going to have, you and me, Joel, this is going to be like us. And actually Overdrive was said to us, you're cool. If you want to start with just you and Joel, that's fine. We will set the consortium up and you can just see how it goes from there. So they were actually super great about that, reassuring us that if it was just us and Stanley, I'm at Surrey and he's at Stanley Community College, we could just start with us too. But luckily, we were able to build a consortium with far more members. And I really think that a lot of that had to do with like the relationships and trust that we built over time. I've been in the system for 12 years and I've been at various levels of, committee work and going to conferences and meeting people. So people trusted, somehow they trusted us and they believed in us. And what that turned into was a lot of librarians just contacting me directly and saying, hey, look, what's this about? And we did some group Q&As, but a lot of it was done through phone calls and emails and just being like, hey, Alan, what's up with this? Like, I know you're starting this, and I think that you have our best interest in mind. And so I'd explain to them, look, you put in this kind of money, we're all going to share the resources, kind of explain the situation to them, because this is kind of a first for us. We have never done anything together as a group outside of our ILS. And our ILS is run through the system office in Raleigh, which controls all 58. And we are completely independent of everything. Like, it's just the community colleges making the decisions. It's completely autonomous group. So it really is kind of they're trusting us and we're trusting them to join us, and we're doing this thing together. So I really think that building those relationships and trust help them trust us that we weren't screwing around. We had a good idea. They listened to our ideas. We send out a lot of introductory emails to a directors list. We have an email list of directors promoting the opportunity. And I sent out another email with saying, here's all the benefits, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you join, you get X, Y, Z. I should probably talk about that too, all the benefits. And we also pushed a lot of this through NCCCLA. I know it's a lot of C's. Community colleges, we're totally doomed because North Carolina has that C in it, and then we have CC in community colleges. So all of our acronyms are terrible because we have to have at least three C's, and we've not found a way around that yet. So NCCCLA is the Community College Library Association. And I was a former president of that group. I'm on the board right now. And we worked through that group in a lot of ways. And I want to talk about that too, because that has to do with the structure. And that's kind of my next slide. And we'll talk about the benefits of joining and kind of like what joining means and all that too. we did a group Zoom. So we had Overdrive come in and we did a bunch of different Q&A sessions, and we had an Overdrive rep there, and then Joel and I were there, and we invited all the directors to join. We had, I think, over 30 out of the 58 that community colleges had representatives show up. And then, of course, after those group Zoom sessions were over, we had one-to-one contact with directors that wanted to answer questions, or some directors couldn't make it and they were just like, please talk to me, but let's do it on a one-on-one Zoom. So we did that too. And again, I mentioned that in the first bullet point, like building relationships, a lot of people just reached out to me directly and just said, hey, what's going on with this? You know, because Joel's great, but he's new to the system and I've been around a while. So a lot of that came through me and just kind of like reassuring them that we knew what was going on. And we really felt like this was something they should join. They didn't have to, but of course, we felt like this was the way forward for community colleges in providing popular reading materials. It was time to get beyond print and time to move to more of an e-format. And I think that's in general, just beyond COVID, that was just the way that we needed to move. So this is our consortium logo. So I'm going to show you in a second. This logo lines up really closely with the North Carolina Community College Library logo. And we did that on purpose because of our structure. So our consortium, the first thing that we did was we set up a pricing model. And the pricing model was based on how much can you afford based on your FTE. So how many full-time students do you have? And so everyone pays a rate based on full-time students. So a small community college like Martin Community College would pay the lowest rate, and it's like, you know, a couple thousand. And then the big ones like Wake Tech in Raleigh or Central Piedmont in Charlotte, they would pay the most because they have the most students, the most user base, so they would pay the most in. But what the good thing that happens with this is that the more money you put into the consortium, the more you can buy. And the purchasing is all done by each individual library. And that really was a big step to getting people to buy in. It was that, yes, you are contributing money, but that money goes into your account and you pick those books. So you are doing your own collection development. You're not turning your money in to a board that's going to do all the picking. So the money you put in is the money you spend on the stuff you want. And yes, it does go towards the group as a whole, but at least you have the chance to purchase things you think are good for yourselves. So if, for example, at your community college, you have semester after semester, you have a project about the Holocaust, you could put your money towards those Holocaust materials and make sure those materials are going to be in that catalog. Or if you want to make sure you have the latest, you know, James Patterson or whatever, you could focus your efforts on those things. And I think that was a huge part of getting members, was reassuring them that, hey, this money is not just going to go to this, you know, void where these people you don't know are going to spend the money. The money was going to go into their own account where it's just going to deduct as they purchase things. Another thing that we did was, like I showed you this image right now you're seeing of our branding. Our branding ties directly into NCCCLA's branding. So the little specks, the little yellow, orange, and bluish squares you see, that's sort of the digital thing that NCCCLA does in their branding. So we tied that in because what we did was we decided that we would have our consortium would reside underneath the auspices of NCCCLA. So the contract that we built with Overdrive is signed officially by the president of that group. So this is similar to what the public libraries have done with the North Carolina Public Library Director Association. Basically, those consortium would live, at least some of them live underneath that group, and that group sort of signs off on it, and then each individual institution signs an invoice like they would for any other database. But the overriding consortia lives underneath that association, which buy-in from all the groups that are in that association. And I just had a meeting with them 2 days ago, and I was trying to say, like, look, we belong to you. We're a part of you. I'm hoping that you will join us, everyone will join us in, trying to make this work for everybody, because that's really the only association we have that joins all 58 community colleges together in a real sense. So we decided that within NCCCLA, we would form our consortium, and our consortium would have a chair that would represent the consortia at NCCCLA meetings. So we would have a representative that would show up, ex officio, non-voting member, that would show up at those association meetings to report about what was happening with the consortium. And the consortium itself is made up of an executive board. So we've already selected 6 people, 1 chair, 5 other members that are part of the executive board. And we're establishing bylaws right now. We're going to set down rules like how many books can one person check out at a time, when are the invoices going to be due, what are we going to do with people that want to join in 2 years? Do they get a penalty for joining in 2 years? All these sort of nitpicky sort of things. We had got lost in the weeds for a while. We finally just said, forget it. Let's just deal with these weed things later. And let's just get the thing set up, and we'll figure a lot of the details out later. We threw a lot of the questions like that people had. We kind of said, oh, we're going to figure it out. You want to be on the executive board? You can help decide how that happens. But all member libraries, anybody who joins is part of what we call the governing board. So there's a tier. So there's a governing board at the bottom and then the executive board above that. So every member library gets a vote. So anything that happens in the executive board will go to a vote of all the member libraries, get 1 rep. And that's the same way that it works at the public libraries as well. So again, we're working with them heavily. And so I mentioned that this branding ties in. So this is our logo, and then that's how it ties in with the NCCCLA logo. So we really liked the fact that we really leveraged the knowledge of our librarians to create that logo, did it completely for free. And that's another thing, is that, librarians have so many skills. If you dig around, we all come from different backgrounds, and we have people in the community college system that were in marketing. And we had a great person who just dug this image up and made it for us and connected that branding. So now that we have this tangible sort of look that connects us to NCCCLA, which is again the big organization. Anyway, we're hoping that this look will hold up for years to come, because we really don't want to have to rebrand and pay somebody because we don't have any money. But the pricing is great for Overdrive. I mean, we're putting forth, out of, a really small percentage of our budget for this. And I think we're going to get a huge payoff, because I think right now we have 20 libraries committed as of yesterday out of 58. And that was our goal. And we still have 2 more months. Well, we have until December 31st before it's over. And January is when we start. So that's our first year, and we were hoping to get 20. We already have 20, and we still have 2 more months. So it's taking off. The pricing is reasonable enough that community college libraries who have no money, like you think publics have no money, we got no money. It's still good enough that we can make it work. Most libraries can make it work. So anyway, we're hoping this takes off, and we're hoping that this really bridges that divide that we're seeing right now, because people aren't coming into our libraries. We are not seeing it. I mean, some libraries might be lucky. We're seeing a 4th drop off at our library. I'm comparing gate counts from last fall, the same time. We had about 2,500 people coming in per week at our library. And now we're seeing about 650 people coming into our library. So we're seeing a 1/4 of what we were. I also direct the tutoring center at our college, and we're seeing exactly the same percentages, a 1/4 of students getting the tutoring. So some people claim that they're the same as they were before, but we are seeing a huge drop off in people using our services. And so we are hoping to excite and reinvigorate by starting up a brand new thing, a brand new group that's going to provide exciting materials that people want to use. And hopefully we'll be able to put together a marketing campaign to get this information out to students. They can download the app on their phones. We know they use their phone. They don't use other devices. They can start using the audiobooks and the ebooks. And, audiobooks are just blowing up right now. So again, we really wanted a way to share audiobooks and to buy audiobooks, popular audiobooks. And this was another way to do that. And I did mention before, and maybe there's a question about this, about Hoopla and NC Live. So NC Live has purchased or has a deal, at least has a deal, not purchased, with Hoopla. And it sounds like you can opt into using the platform for Hoopla. So that's another option for you if you're wanting to like expand or think about your options with adding e-audio and ebooks. Is maybe you want to look into Hoopla, because that sounds like it'll be an option next year when the resource cycle for NC Live kicks over. So I would encourage you guys to look at that. I'm going to look at it too. I mean, maybe it's better than Overdrive. I have a lot of experience with it, but the basic model that we heard was that Hoopla worked more with like unlimited simultaneous use for titles, which was a great thing. And Overdrive was a little better for building like a constant, like stable catalog of books, and Overdrive had more current bestsellers. And I don't know, some of you guys might know better than me, that was sort of the consensus that we got when we were kind of researching this. And Joel, the guy who helped me, he would have been here today, but he has a different presentation at another conference. Coincidentally, he said that he'd use both, and he thought Overdrive was a better like long-term sort of fit. But I think Hoopla is going to be a great thing for the state to add, because I think there's some different options in there, like a different purchasing model that you might want to look at that might work for your library, maybe better than Overdrive or better than some other options. So I think it's pretty exciting that the state has that option too now. And Hoopla does, I think, videos and stuff too. So you could add, popular DVDs and things to your collection streaming. So anyway, I think there's a lot of really good movement on this right now, both in community colleges and through NC Live. So I don't know if there's any questions. I saw the chat beep up a few times at me, but I'm willing to answer any questions. And I hope this is somewhat useful for you guys.
We do have a chat question. What suggestions do you have for creating consortia for libraries with special collections?
Yeah, that's a good question. As far as I guess you're talking about digital special collections. So coincidentally, we are building a digital special collection at my college right now. And I'm not sure exactly where you're coming from, but we are building like a community, a county, collection of materials about the history of our county through an LSTA grant. And we have worked with a lot of different groups that have relevant information about our county, and kind of saying, hey, we'll share what we got with you if you share what you got with us, and we both give credit back and so it's not like a consortia, but it's sort of like looking at people's collections and taking their stuff, and then they take our stuff and we distribute back and forth. Right now, I actually have a deal with Chapel Hill, and I almost have a deal with NC State to take their stuff and credit, obviously give attribution to them, but put it on within our system so that it's centrally locatable. So I don't know. I mean, I think that the consortia with special collections, it could revolve around maybe moving away from the OCLC product, maybe moving into an open source system, maybe trying to hire a consultant that would come in to move into, digital NC just moved into an open source system from the OCLC. The name's escaping me right now. It'll come to me in a second, but the big one, the OCLC owned that everyone used for years. Digital NC went away from that, and maybe something like that could happen. You could consolidate your power into either getting a better deal from OCLC or moving to a different platform that might be free and more long-term stable for your budget. Other than that, I'm not exactly positive. I don't work with a lot of special collections, but I know we have worked librarians are awesome for like sharing things. We've never gotten rejected when we've asked for someone's had something about Surrey County and we said, hey, can we please use that and put it into our collection and we'll attribute it, and we've never had anyone say no. I know that's not kind of the consortia you're talking about. I would think the consortia that you might be talking about would be more like a system, like a joint system you all could share, and then each person would have their own little special, area within that system. So I think that really trying to move away from OCLC is something that I think that I see a trend happening right now. And I'm sure Digital NC would be a great place to start asking those questions since they moved away themselves.
Like Laura has a question about local authors and self-published authors and something related to that.
Yeah, so anything like that can be added to Overdrive. So we can add those things into Overdrive. Also, I believe that you can have those things added to BiblioBoard, the homegrown collection. Since you are a North Carolina person, Laura, you could, I'm not sure that process. I'm sure NC Live could help you. I'm sure you could have your materials added into BiblioBoard, but I know that I heard from people that said that they've added self-published things into Overdrive. It's just like an EPUB. If you can get an EPUB, you can upload it into your Overdrive instance, and then you would make it available to everybody in the consortium if you wanted to, or everyone in your, in your group. And again, that gets into some weeds about who you can share it with, but just talking about our consortia straight ahead, you could share it with everybody in the consortium if you wanted to. If you had an Advantage Plus account, which is like an extra thing that you could add on with a little extra money, you could, limit it to your people.
Are there any other questions, any comments?
I think there's a lot of opportunity for this in a lot of different ways going forward. And we called it Digital Library because we could see this having so many benefits for so many different things going forward. For example, every community college has a nursing program, or maybe all but one. So why could we not purchase a database like R2 Digital Library for everybody? Why could we not get a better deal through them and run this through here?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We do not feel like we have great representation at official channels for community colleges. So we've really taken it upon ourselves to form our own groups. And so that's kind of a theme that we're seeing going forward, is that we wanted to set this up because we can see it working that way in the future. We can see that we're going to have to start taking things into our own hands. And if we want to have something good, we do it ourselves. And so in your own groups, you might think about as you're setting up groups or connection with people, like how can we leverage our power to get this thing that we all need? What do we all need? And how can we make it cheaper or better? We're going to be able to put in, like, say for my college, we put in $5,000 this year. We're going to get like $70,000 worth of content back just by joining with everybody else. And yeah, the downside is you're sharing it with other people, but the plus side is most of those materials are not going to be used all the time, and we're going to be able to provide such a large swath of electronic materials that were not available before. And then, next year it's going to build twice on top of $40,000 worth of materials for $10,000. And the next year it's going to exponentially build. So I see like this as being such a good way of us to make our money go so much further. And librarians are great about sharing anyway. And it's like, why don't we use that quality that we have, kind of innately, a lot of us have that quality. Why don't we use that quality to our benefit? Like we all join together and form like autonomous groups that can just, work to make collections that are usable for our people that we know they need with limited, I mean, I know maybe I'm getting too, socialisty for you all, but I think that's sort of the way that, that's sort of the foundation of libraries in general. And I think that if we kind of take those broad concepts, we can have so much more power than together than we do apart. And that's cheesy and cliche, but it's super true. And the more I think about like years down the road of what we're doing right now with this digital library, the more I'm like, wow, you know, we're going to have something really substantial really quickly for a small user base. And so we're going to be able to provide great stuff to them, you know, going into the future. And it's going to last. Hopefully it's going to last. You know, it's going to be something that people can use going forward, barring some crazy technological shift. Sorry, someone said they couldn't hear me, but I haven't done anything on my end.
I can still hear you. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. It might be an issue on their end. But yeah, all these things you're talking about, I wish these were things they would teach you in library school. You know, they'll teach you how to bargain and how to negotiate and how to create these consortia. So
Yeah.
get you going on it. So anybody else have any comments or questions? Not seeing any. Well, we really appreciate your time. That was a fantastic presentation, very interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this recording, get ready for the next session. The next one coming up is going to be from CUS. So we have a panel coming up for you on remote learning and the digital divide, considering opportunities and challenges in academic libraries. So that is next. So we'll see you all then.
Thank you.